It is a pleasure to introduce Logan Connor. He was our speaker tonight. Logan is the Director of Aviculture at the Ripley Waterfowl Conservancy right here in Litchfield. He's in charge of raising, breeding, looking after the 400 or so birds at the Conservancy, plus many other duties, including talks like this tonight. Logan is unusual, as he began volunteering at the Conservancy when he was a freshman in high school, and he remained a loyal volunteer until the day he was hired. Our kind of guy, if you ask me. The LHAS first met Logan when he applied for one of our scholarships in his second year at Unity College in Maine. We had no trouble picking him, as he had already completed a year of college with a major in wildlife biology. He graduated in 2019 and has been employed at the Conservancy ever since. He's been the Director of Aviculture for the last year, but he was sort of the acting director and before that. So I'll turn the program over to Logan, and please give him a warm welcome.
So we'll see if I can get this. I was talking to Janet before, and technology, even though I'm young, technology is not my thing.
You're here, I know. We talked about.
We need the
Let's flip this mic up a little bit for you.
All right, so my name is Logan Connor. I'm the Director of Aviculture, and again, what that means is I take care of the Conservancy's collection of birds. So that includes daily cleaning, feeding, during the breeding season, taking care of all the young birds. I certainly love my job. You know, they say, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. Well, that's certainly true for me. My days fly by, my weeks fly by. I spend most of my time working at night too, because I want to spend as much time as I can during the day with the actual birds. So today I'm going to talk a bit about, what the Conservancy does, who we are, and a bit more about what it means to perform captive waterfowl conservation. So I started at the Conservancy in 2011. Again, I was a freshman in high school. I grew up, I love songbirds. My mom has lots of videos of me doing documentaries. Yeah, so that's me right there. You can't really tell in the picture, but in my legs, there's little ducklings. So my family has always raised chickens.
Excuse me.
For show.
Let's just get rid of that.
Okay. So lots of different breeds. I still do show chickens. So on the right there, that's me with my favorite pair they're called blue lace red Wyandottes. So getting into birds, chickens and ducks are obviously very different, but as far as their care goes, it's fairly similar. So I helped my grandfather and my uncle take care of a variety of different birds, including those were mallard ducklings. And I loved it. So in 2011, I actually knew Ian Gehrig. I don't know if that rings a bell for anybody in here. So I knew Ian through raising birds. His dad was a big chicken shower, just like me. So he told me a bit about the place. I was eager to come help, and I've been there ever since. So I did go to college in 2015. I have a degree in wildlife biology. The thing about wildlife biology, it has a lot to do with what I'm doing right now, but they certainly didn't teach aviculture in college. Everything that I have learned and am currently doing is all through experience. What I love most about my job is that every day is different. Just when you think you know what the birds are going to do, they completely change it up on you. So Ripley Waterfowl Conservancy is known as one of the hidden gems of Litchfield. It's about a minute from here. So if you go down Brush Hill, take a right onto Duck Pond Road, there we are. So that's an aerial picture of the main part of our facility. We are one of the largest and most diverse collections of captive waterfowl in the United States. We right now have exactly 449 birds, comprised of 89 species, and again, from all over the world. Our smallest collection is actually of North American species. The conservancy itself is 16 acres, but we own another 150 acres throughout Duck Pond Road. There's a few pieces on Milton Road and on Brush Hill Road. Waterfowl conservation is really our big thing. We're a breeding center for rare and endangered waterfowl species, but we're also getting involved in other projects as well. So we have a couple fields on Brush Hill Road and a new field that we just purchased on closer up on Brush Hill Road. Right now we have applications in with NRCS. We're hoping to do songbird habitat. We have the land right now. We're not doing anything, and we're never going to do anything with it. So we might as well do something good with it. So that's between me and the few people that are working at the Conservancy. That's another big part of our day to day. So looking at the picture up top is all our aviaries. That picture was taken in June, which is our big annual fundraising event. So normally the big white tent's not there. The birds are thankful for that. They certainly don't like that. So it's hard to see in the picture, but about half of the Conservancy is covered by nets. The other half is wide open. I'll talk a bit more about that towards the end of the presentation, but I'm sure you've all heard of avian influenza. So that is certainly a challenge, not having the whole place netted in. Because of how big that field is, I would love to put the world's largest aviary, but it's just not possible. So Ripley Waterfowl Conservancy was founded by Dylan Ripley and Mary Livingston. So you may, if you follow the Conservancy, just a few years ago, our name was Livingston Ripley Waterfowl Conservancy. That's a mouthful. So we dropped the Livingston. That's why we're now Ripley. Dylan Ripley is well known for a lot of things, especially his work with the Smithsonian and Yale, the Peabody Museum. But his real passion was working with waterfowl. So in the 20s, he was raising birds on the current grounds that we're on. It wasn't anything like it is nowadays, but he has lots of books that he's written. One of them is A Paddling of Ducks. If anyone here is interested in waterfowl, it's a great book to read. And he was just a teenager at that point raising ducks, and there's lots of stories of him going to Maine and collecting eggs, and it really built the Conservancy into what it is today. Dylan Ripley was also one of the first people to breed a lot of species in captivity. So the red-breasted goose, Laison teal, Hawaiian duck. There's a whole list of birds, and Dylan was the first. So that's him at the top with a nene goose. That's a species from Hawaii. And actually, Dylan Ripley was also the first to breed nene geese in captivity. And right now we have two breeding pairs of nene geese, and I just brought in a third from Kansas. So we're doing well with that species. In 1985, the land was donated to the nonprofit that we now call RWC. So what is aviculture? You heard me talk on the director of aviculture. Private aviculture is very important. So it's the practice of raising and caring for wild birds in captivity. And there's lots of different reasons for raising and caring for these wild birds. So whether it's breeding for game stocks, preservation of declining species, and really display and education for the public. There's lots, especially as time goes on, people have different meanings for what aviculture truly is. So raising a parrot in your house, some may call aviculture. Truthfully, I wouldn't call it that. But, if everyone's raising birds, then that's okay with me, as long as they're doing so the right way. So aviculture covers a wide variety of bird species, and it's practiced really around the world. Europe, Australia, United States being the most popular. That's because a lot of time and money goes into raising birds. So those three places, the way they actually describe it online is people in Europe, Australia, and United States actually have the most time and the most money. So that's why they tend to be the ones to raise birds. Aviculture in Europe is very, very popular. Aviculturists here in the United States are constantly importing birds from Europe because there's a lot of species there that we don't have well established here. So you may know the bird behind there. That's one of my favorites. That's a long-tailed duck, also used to be called the old squaw. They're really fun right now. So our male, his sprig, his tail there isn't quite that long. That's actually a picture from the internet. But ours is constantly calling. It's one of my favorite things to hear in the morning. So the bird in this picture is a red crown crane. So one thing I forgot to mention is, our name is Ripley Waterfowl Conservancy, but we do a lot more than just waterfowl. So we currently have ducks, geese, swans, pheasants, cranes, quail, chickens, thrushes, doves, lots of different birds. And again, it really, there's a lot of species that are doing poorly in the wild. And we have the room for it. We have the facility for it. So why not, work with some other species as well? So there's many reasons why aviculture is important. Here's what I would say are the top. So keeping viable captive populations, captive breeding programs, reintroduction of species, behavioral observation and studies, and education are what I would say are the most important. So this is a picture, a printout. We use a system called ZIMS. So if you go to the Conservancy, I meant to ask in the beginning, but how many people have been to the Conservancy? So quite a few. You may have noticed that every bird there is banded. So those bands are like our social security number. Every band has a specific number on it, which I then punch into a system called ZIMS. ZIMS gives me everything I could ever need to know about that species. Of that individual bird, who its parents are, who its parents' are, where they came from. So that plays a huge part in the work that we do. So this is directly off of ZIMS, and it shows of the 89 species that we have at the Conservancy, how it breaks down according to the IUCN Red List. So we have 4 species that are critically endangered, 8 species endangered, 10 vulnerable, and obviously lots that are least concerned and near threatened. As time goes on, I would expect those numbers to change. Unfortunately, there's a lot of species right now that are right on the cusp between, doing okay and not okay. And as human population grows, habitat loss, we're going to see the numbers on the right start to climb up. So a big part of what we do, what's really important is that we keep pure populations of these species in captivity. There's a good chance that a lot of species in the next few years may completely go extinct in the wild. We actually currently have one species, which I'll show you a picture of, called the Edwards pheasant. It's extinct in the wild and only being kept alive through aviculture. So there's 2 other places like us in the United States, Sylvan Heights Bird Park in North Carolina and Panola Aviary in Louisiana. We also do a ton of work with AZA, so zoos. We're constantly sending birds out and receiving birds in from different facilities all around the country. What I always like to say, you could be going on vacation and below deck of that plane could be crates full of birds coming from Ripley's. We send all our birds through Delta. And tomorrow I'm actually headed to the airport to Bradley to send out a scaly-sided merganser. It's going to Denver, Colorado. So we're always shipping our birds out. And the reason we're doing that, it doesn't make sense for us to keep all these important birds here in Litchfield. We want to make sure that their bloodlines are spread out across the country.
Do they need a human to take care of them?
Oh, yeah. So all these birds are very dependent on people. And I'll get into that a little bit more.
I meant like to travel.
Oh, no. No. So we have specialized crates. We cover the crate so they can't see out. I put them in a crate here in Litchfield, drive them to the airport. They get in a plane. And when they wake up or step out of their crate, they're in a completely different spot. So some species do better than others at adjusting. And that's a big part of what we do too. We want to make sure that they're going to adequate facilities. So that's why, a lot of our work really is with established facilities such as zoos or the 2 other bird parks. What Ripley has that the other places don't is we don't have summers like they do down south. So there's lots of species that we would love to have, but we have winter. Sylvan Heights and Panola can both keep lots of species where we can't. 98% of our birds stay out year round. From a collection standpoint, it only makes sense for us to keep birds that do okay in the winter. We're limited on indoor housing, and bringing birds indoors through the duration of the winter isn't great to begin with. So we want to make sure that everyone's happy, fat, and healthy through the winter, and they all stay outside. But what that means is that because we don't have those summers, we can keep birds that they can't. Those being sea ducks. So sea ducks are really my big thing. That's what I really enjoy, is working with sea ducks. So eiders, longtails, scoters, all those different species we have right here in Litchfield. They don't need salt water, although you normally find those species in the wild in salt water. They're not like saltwater fish. You take a fish and you put it in salt water and it's not going to last long. Sea ducks aren't that way. So we have really changed our facility the last couple of years with the idea of being able to keep sea ducks. So if you go to the Conservancy, some of you may have seen it recently and heard a bit about it. We use a system called a reverse bog. It's a series of 4 ponds connected by rivers. All of the ponds have jets in them. So just like a hot tub, it's constantly pushing water. Sea ducks, although they don't need salt water, what they do need is cold, clean water. So one of our ponds where we have spectacle eiders, which is my favorite species. I think I put pictures in here, but I may not have. You're going to have to come to the Conservancy. But again, longtails, harlequin ducks, all those species are in this bog. The water trickles down, not trickles, it's moving pretty quick, into a big catch basin. That catch basin is full of gravel and different plastic plates that pull out the solids. And the water is pumped uphill to another catch basin, which is full of plants. Cattails being the best plant. It sucks all the nutrients out of the water and it comes back in crystal clear. So there's 30 ducks. Ducks, waterfowl in general, the one thing they do is eat, sleep, and poop. So that's challenging when you're keeping 400 birds in captivity, to keep it clean and to, deal with the amount of poop is very big. So that water, we have a huge dependence, as you can imagine, on clean water. We fill all our ponds, all our cement ponds are filled with wells, the same wells that are in your house. We have 2 wells supporting hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. So before, I should have put a picture in here, but I didn't, but we were cleaning these ponds every 2 to 3 days. With this new system, we can clean it once a month. So that's saving 20,000 gallons of water it's a very big deal. So we currently have 2 populations of spectacle eiders, one in the bog and another one on just a normal well-filled pond. The difference in feathers is insane. I mean, birds need nutrients. Wells aren't providing a lot of the nutrients that are good for feather growth. So that's a big part of it as well. But the bog is really a natural system. For a few years when we first put it in, I was dealing with string algae. Is probably our biggest challenge, because it's a natural flowing system. The string algae loves to grow and it thrives on, again, duck poop. So I actually introduce natural bacteria into the system, and it really works just like any river or pond around here. It's doing its job. So captive breeding programs, that's our big thing. Those are emperor geese. So emperor geese are a species from Alaska. We have 28 emperor geese currently at our facility, which is the most in the United States. They're one of the cutest goslings there are. They little gray fluff balls. So every year we hatch between 200 and 250 duckling, goslings, chicks, cygnets. And every one that we hatched was hatched for a reason. At the beginning so right now, I'm sitting down every day and making my plan for who we're going to breed and why. Again, we can't hatch even 250 birds and expect to keep them all at the Conservancy. That's a lot of feed, a lot of mess. So we really want to hatch them for places that need them and send them out. So there are species that are more important than others, obviously, from a conservation standpoint. Emperor geese being one of them. We're constantly trying to hatch as many emperor geese as we can. The challenge with emperor geese, the females are some of the best mothers there are. They're excellent at sitting on eggs. They're excellent at raising young. The biggest challenge with them is crows. Crows are very smart, and it's a constant race between me and crows to get to the nest before they do. So they'll sit there all day long and watch the birds. Emperor geese are very smart. And again, they have to be where they're from in the wild. They don't want predators to know where their nests are. So they'll lay an egg, and what a duck goose does is they lay an egg every other day. So they'll lay their egg, cover it, and leave, and the crows will watch them. So when they come back to the nest and uncover and lay, they'll know. So what I do is I try to find the nest before the crows do. When they lay, I switch the egg with a wooden dummy egg. And the crows, I mean, I have cameras on some of the nests. I'll watch the crows come up, peck the egg, they realize it's wood, and they fly away. But from that point on, I mean, they know that the nest is there. So we lose a lot of eggs to crows, and there's not much we can really do. I've tried to do, you can hang a CD, and as it goes around in the wind, it throws reflections, and it lasts for about 2 days. And the crows figure out that it's not a threat. I have to give it to the crows. I have to hand it to them. They're smart.
You can't keep them in a netted area.
So the reason we do so well with emperor geese is because they're in our open field. They prefer our open field where they are has 2 ponds connected by a big river. It's probably a 2-acre field, if not more. So they have lots of room to really separate. And what emperor geese do is they break off into pairs. So during the non-breeding season, they're all flocked together. And starting now, they're starting to break off, and they really defend their territory. So they like to have the option to spread out. So we could get away potentially with bringing a few under nets, but we couldn't do it for all of them. So we just, I try to outsmart the crows. That's what we can do. So Ripley's is involved in a lot of what's called species survival plans, or SSPs. So zoos are very good at, there's a lot of people working there. They have a lot of resources that, smaller private facilities don't. So zoos put on these SSPs for different species, whether they're doing bad in captivity or in the wild. So these are some of the species that we're currently involved in the SSPs with. This is just a small example. There's many more. So on the right, the Bear's pochard, that's a critically endangered species. That's the 2nd rarest duck in the world. In the country, there's about 30. We have 20 of them at Ripley's. So we do very well with them. So I actually just got the plan for the Bear's pochard SSP. We're going to be sending out about 4 of our adult Bear's pochard to 4 different zoos. So one's going to each, and we're going to be bringing in 6. And that's just to diversify our current flock. The challenge with birds in captivity, especially in the case of the Bear's pochard, there's only 250 to 300 of them left in the wild. So, the idea is we're not going to go out into the wild and collect all these birds and bring them to captivity. We want them to do good in the wild too. So when they first came into the country, they only came in 2, maybe 3 pairs. So the challenge with that is eventually you risk inbreeding. You're bottlenecking your genetic diversity. So it's very important. We actually blood tested all of our Bear's pochard and sent them out for testing, so we know who's related to who. So now I have this big graph. It's very confusing. And you go down the graph, it's like a puzzle. And you find, the females here and the males here, and you line up, and anything below a 3 is acceptable to breed. Anything 3 and beyond is not. So there's about 6 birds, so 3 pairs that we should really be breeding. The other ones are just kind of there for now and will eventually be sent out to other locations. The top left corner, that's the Edwards pheasant. So that species is extinct in the wild. Pheasants are another species that we've been working with forever, but even more so now. So we're 98% done with a new pheasantry. It's our newest exhibit. We do all of our construction in-house. So there's 3 of us building this new pheasantry. It's probably about wall to wall of this room. divided into 9 different runs. So we could potentially keep 9 different species. Right now, if you go to the Conservancy and you're walking through the aviaries, every aviary has pheasants in them, but you never see them. Pheasants spend all their time hiding in the back. So what the pheasantry allows us to do is, people who are visiting can see them up close, whereas they normally wouldn't. Pheasants are some of the rarest birds in the world. So we're also going to have the potential to, breed these rare species. Certainly the hope is to breed Edwards pheasants soon. Our female Edward pheasant, who's actually inside right now, just started laying eggs. So the problem is she's not with a male, so her eggs are infertile. But hopefully we can get her back outside soon and she'll start laying again. The red-breasted goose, which is one of my least favorite birds. They're very fun to look at. They almost look like a big harlequin duck. Yeah. They sound like a dog's squeaky toy.
Oh, geez.
And it nonstop all day long, especially as it gets close to breeding season. They're fun to look at. They're fun to work with, but I can't take them. And then the red crown crane, that's a relatively newer species that we've brought in. Way out in the back of our field, we have our red crown crane exhibit. It's very large. 2 years ago, the female red crown crane just came of age. Instead of laying an egg like she was supposed to, she made a nest and she rolled a rock into the nest and started incubating a rock. The problem with that, obviously it's a rock. She's never going to hatch anything, but it was experience. Birds who get experience, whether it's doing it the right way or not, there's a huge increase in success going forward. So this past season, she actually finally laid 2 eggs. The male's a little bit older, so he took on more of the roles of incubating. Unfortunately, the eggs were infertile, which again is very common for first-year birds. So we're hopeful that this year they're fertile.
And since he took a part of that, maybe he'll have more interest.
He probably will. The female was okay, but the male certainly was better. And that's a lot of species aren't like that. Usually the male does his job, which is breeding. Will occasionally guard the nest, but they won't incubate. What's interesting about red crown cranes is they lay 2 eggs a clutch. In the wild, what they would do is if both hatched, they would choose which chick is the stronger one, and they would kick the other one away. They want to put all their effort into raising the stronger chick. So in captivity, what we can do is, take in the one that they pull away and hand raise it, and then potentially have 2 young ones. So we haven't gotten there yet, but hopefully this year we will.
Logan, what countries are these all native to?
Yeah, so most of them are Asia. So red-breasted geese are from Europe, and then the 3 at the top are Asian species. And it really varies, same with songbirds. You have nesting locations and wintering locations. In the case of the Bear's pochard, the population is very fragmented throughout. So it's really hard to get accurate readings of their full population. But there's populations here and there throughout Russia. Red crown cranes, their main area is Japan. And Edwards pheasant is Taiwan. So all pheasants, going back, all pheasants are from Asia. So we have the ringneck pheasant that we see around here. That species was introduced for the purpose of hunting. They don't do well in Connecticut, but in other areas of the country, they do okay. But that species was never meant to be here. So we also have the potential to reintroduce species. The challenge with reintroduction, there's a couple challenges. So we can't walk into our aviaries right now and pick out a bird and say, you're going back to the wild. Our birds are babied.
I was going to ask about imprinting.
Yeah, so that's an issue too. So every day our birds eat out of a bucket that we fill. They're given their favorite, I don't want to say treats because they're not treats, but during the wintertime, we're trying to make sure that they stay fat and healthy. So we're giving them produce and mealworms and all sorts of live fish. So they have it very easy. If we want to reintroduce species, we have to completely change the way that we go about working with those species. So one of the species we have reintroduced in the past, and we're hoping to do so again this year, is trumpeter swans. So trumpeter swans, population-wise, is in much better shape now than it historically was. And that species was just about wiped out. Through habitat restoration and captive reintroduction, that species has bounced back and is doing very well. What we do is we hatch trumpeter swans and we send them to Iowa, which is basically a training facility. They learn how to become wild, what they're supposed to do, and the species goes back out and it's had great success. So COVID and avian influenza have both limited the amount of trumpeter swans we can reintroduce. In the next couple of weeks, I should be hearing from the person who's in charge of this, but the hope is that we will be able to reintroduce those species, or that species. For all the other species, what I always say is there's a reason that bird is doing poor in the wild. So in the case of the Bear's poacher, habitat loss is one of the most destructive things that's happening to that species. So it doesn't make sense for us to raise all these Bear's poacher in captivity, send them to Russia to be reintroduced to face the same fate. So it's important that we're keeping pure populations in captivity. If the governments in these areas can make changes and improve habitat and the population starts to grow, then certainly places like Ripley's and everywhere else can reintroduce those species. But it's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously captive studies are very easy to do in captivity. So we're constantly working with state agencies, different schools to do, captive studies. So a good example of that is, so on the right there, the Canada goose with the neck band. 2 years ago, the state of Connecticut, actually this was a whole countrywide thing. They were trying to come up with new ways to track and monitor live birds. So we have a species, the bar-headed goose, which neck size is very similar to that of the Canada goose. So what better place to test something out than in captivity? So the state came, we put neck collars on a bunch of our birds. We have the ability to watch them every day. So if neck collars have negative effects, we would see it right off. We're constantly banding birds. Obviously we band our own birds, but Ripley's involved in a lot of wild Canada goose and mallard banding, which a lot of it we do right here in Litchfield. We've done underwater footage. So 3 years ago, we had a company or a researcher that came in and had these crazy cameras that we put at the bottom of our ponds, and they were able to watch how birds dived and how they use their feet, which before that, not a whole lot was known. And it was very easy to do so. With the species we actually used was called the New Zealand scaup. That's a golden eye right there. So it wasn't that species, but New Zealand scaup, or the New Zealand version of our lesser and greater scaup. Scaly-sided mergansers, which are on the top, that's an endangered species. That's actually the duckling there on the bottom left. So scaly-sided mergansers are another species that's not doing well in the wild. The main reason is deforestation. That's a cavity nester, so they need trees to be able to find cavities. They were brought into captivity in the United States about 10 years ago. There were very few people working with them. Ripley's had a couple breeding pairs. Today, we've sent out hundreds of scaly-sided mergansers around the country, so the population is very well established now. But what we figured out in captivity, and I'm not just saying Ripley, this was kind of a countrywide aviculturist thing, but that species prefers, what a wood duck nest box looks like? So take a wood duck box and make a little bit bigger of a hole. That's the only box that scaly-sided mergansers will nest in. So what we can do, and what the Chinese government has done, is taken ideas of our boxes and deployed them in the wild. So now this species is choosing nest boxes over cavities even. And they've seen great success. They're raising lots of young, not to the point where the population is, out of their danger zone yet. But it's certainly a good thing to have
Sounds like it's
young birds coming up. I would say it was a success, especially from a captive standpoint. Education is also a big part of what we do. So in 2022, so last year, we served more than 900 students, again, across Connecticut. And most of what we do is we try to have students or classes come to the Conservancy. I was going to make a joke at the beginning. I do all of our tours. I'm the one that greets you if you come on the weekends. It's very easy for me to give a tour because 400 birds take the pressure off of me. This isn't really my strong suit, talking in this kind of setting. I like to have the birds to point out what I'm talking about. So we try to have students come to us, and in last year we did very well. We saw about 3,000 guests and 50 plus group guided tours. What's important, again, just like captive studies, having students see the birds up close is huge. Everyone knows what a duck is, but until you see the diversity that there truly is in the wild and what we offer at Ripley's, that's enough to, change the career path or, the direction of a variety of different students. It certainly made a difference for me. So we do all sorts of different education groups. We offer a summer camp. We have 10 different programs that we offer. So teachers will sign up based on what they're currently learning in their curriculum. And there's a lot to learn about birds, whether it's how they fly or how they adapt, or even just, looking at them in the case of the picture there. It makes a huge difference. So unfortunately, aviculture is becoming less and less popular. It's kind of understandable, the prices of everything are going up. A lot of people aren't really interested in spending $30 on a 40-pound bag of feed that's gone in a day. We go through 3 tons of food, well, actually more than that, right? 3.5 tons of food a month. So it's a lot. So, it's important that facilities like Ripley and Sylvan Heights and Panola, stay strong, stay united, and continue aviculture. And hopefully, the private aviculturists of the world continue to do so as well. A big part of aviculture, I talked a lot about, again, the big facilities, but private aviculture is very important as well. There's lots and lots of private aviculturists. Connecticut, there's probably about 10. You go over to Massachusetts and there's hundreds of people raising birds. And there's lots of birds that are currently held in private aviculture that aren't in big facilities like zoos and Ripley's. So it's very, it's a fine balance between AZA and private aviculturists. We work with everybody. So like I said in the beginning, avian influenza is certainly playing a big part in the bird world right now. It's a very scary time for anyone raising birds or who cares about birds. The Conservancy is about 50% open. So what that means, and every day birds from Bantam Lake fly over to Ripley's and they contribute to our 3,000 tons of feed that we go through a year. I don't know if I said 3,000. I meant 3 tons if I didn't say that before. 3 tons of food a year. So the challenge with that is you never know. All it takes is one bird that's carrying avian influenza to risk your entire population. So we've actually pulled a lot of birds off of display and put them under nets. Currently, if you drive by in the morning time at the Conservancy, you'll see lots of flashing lights and radios and all sorts of crazy things going on. It's just to try to deter wild birds. We're just doing whatever we can. In a normal year, so this time last year when avian influenza was just starting, we had probably 250 mallards on our pond every day. 250 mallards and 50 or so wild Canada geese. That's a problem even without avian influenza. Wild birds are carrying all sorts of diseases and parasites and eating our feed. And they're actually, Canada geese are nasty towards our own birds. I'm not a big fan of Canada geese. So it's good that we're, trying to deter them. And there's lots of other available habitat around here for wild birds, especially mallards. They spend all day loafing around Bantam Lake, as I'm sure you know. So we're keeping a close eye on it. The scary part about even influenza is that potentially, if Ripley's became, or any facility became a tested positive, the USDA has the right, and what they're doing is they're coming in and culling entire flocks. So
Does that mean destroying them?
yeah. So that's what's happening right now. So egg prices are really high. People are blaming that on a lot of different things. The true reason is because of even influenza. 59 million chickens in a year's time have been culled because of it. And there's no reason that an enclosed chicken farm shouldn't be able to keep even influenza out. But everyone's just doing what they can to make sure that their birds stay healthy. So where I'm going with all this is right now, as time goes on, aviculture is just as important as ever. It's very important that places like Ripley continue to do the work that we're doing. And we hope to do so forever. So those of you who have been to our facility before, thank you. We hope to see you again. Here's a couple of things that we do currently offer. Guided tours. We do owl prowls throughout the winter. We have many members-only events, summer camp, junior aviculturist, which is shadowing me. We try to do as much as we can, and a big part of our current agenda is to, get back in with the community. Ripley's has taken on different direction for many years. For a while we were focusing on things out of the country and coming back. So Ripley's is, again, that hidden gem here in Litchfield. And we want to make sure we get involved, and we hope to see all of you there. In the front here, I have a bunch of brochures. I also have a sign-in for our email list. So we're constantly sending out newsletters and information on our events. And if you go on our website and are interested in purchasing a membership, all that information is on our website as well. Any questions? Yeah.
Yes. Are you still closed for self-guided tours because of the avian flu? Because I know we have to limit that.